The BRICS countries are actively moving away from the dollar, and the dollar is being used less and less around the world. It also means that the U.S. empire, which is built on the U.S. dollar, is falling apart. And if you don't have the money that comes from being the World Bank, Washington loses a lot of money. It's also a Ponzi plan, you know? Additionally, the Ponzi plan can only work if there are always people who believe in it and back it up. When people figure out that it's all a scam and leave, the whole thing falls apart quickly, just like an empire does when its power is lost. A recent episode of The Jimmy Dore Show with Max Keiser talked at length about how people think the value of the American dollar is falling. Keiser boldly called this idea one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in the last 50 to 60 years. This claim led to a comparison between established money systems and new digital currencies. Keiser drew attention to El Salvador's groundbreaking decision to adopt Bitcoin, comparing its bold economic strategy to the U.S.'s more cautious approach. At the moment, Bitcoin's price is $1.62,000, which means that the global supply of Bitcoin has shrunk by 6.32% in the past week. El Salvador and other countries are not only investing in Bitcoin, but they are also incorporating it into their economies. This could set an example for other countries to follow. Keiser talks about how El Salvador's continued dedication to Bitcoin could make it one of the richest countries in the world because it invested early and heavily in cryptocurrency. This move goes against what has been done before and creates new opportunities for economic growth and happiness. It's funny that people in the US are upset about sending money to Ukraine, but the government makes the money so no one can stop them. It can be printed and sent to Ukraine. At this point, we can see that all that money causes inflation, which then wipes out the middle class. People are furious and say that they should stop giving money to Ukraine. But to get to the point, they should be fighting against fiat money and for Bitcoin to be used instead, like we do in El Salvador. Then you can enjoy the miracle that is happening in El Salvador. The Bitcoin system works in a circle. All of it is in Bitcoin. If you want, you can use Bitcoin for the rest of your life in El Salvador. Every month and every year, more people are adopting, but you can do it now. That's when my friend Mike Peterson of Bitcoin Beach started the Bitcoin revolution and the cycle economy in El Salvador. He did this by giving free Bitcoin to everyone in town, including the people who sold puppies. They told them to just use Bitcoin because the surfers who came to El Zante brought money from different countries that local businesses couldn't accept because they don't take credit cards and the surfers didn't have bank accounts. It was really annoying that these guys had to walk 20 miles down the road to an ATM to get cash. On the Bitcoin standard, however, it doesn't matter what country or currency you're from as long as you have a Bitcoin, you can do business. This is because local businesses accept Bitcoin. The deal is instant, and no one can stop them. You can't cut that off or stop it. Freedom has moved from the US to El Salvador. I'm telling people to leave the US because it's a waste of time. The US is now at the very back of the line. They are no longer the bright city on the hill. It's a homeless person who is fucked out, hooked to fentanyl, and dying from whatever. You should now leave the US. It's a trash hole. It is called the Banana Republic. In his most recent speech to CPAC, President McKinley talked about inflation in the US and how the country is now making money off of its debt. No one else wants to buy American debt, so the US makes money to pay for it. This is known as monetizing debt. People in the US used to laugh at Central America and say, "Ha, you have to buy your own debt, you hold too much money." So the president of El Salvador is telling people at CPAC in Washington, D.C. that they are now making money off of their own debt. Since World War II, the US dollar has been a world reserve currency. This means that only the US can do it. They cut Iran off quickly, and they put sanctions on Russia and took its property. To answer your question, yes, they have turned the dollar into a weapon, which is a bad thing to do because it makes these countries want to find an alternative to the dollar. That's what BRICS stands for. In other words, the BRICS countries are moving away from the dollar quickly. Dollar use is falling sharply around the world. The US empire, which is built on the US dollar, is falling apart because of this. And if you don't have the money that comes from being the World Bank, Washington loses a lot of money. It's also a Ponzi plan. The Ponzi plan can only work if there are always people who believe in it and back it up. If people figure out that this is a Ponzi scheme and leave, it falls apart quickly, just like a kingdom does when it ends. That's where we are now. For 50 or 60 years, the US empire or US dollar empire has been a huge Ponzi scheme. This is the last inning of that scam. Also, when it falls, it will be like building number 7. It will fall in its own place without stopping. Everyone will be confused about what happened. It happened so quickly. They'll come up with some reasons, but it will be quick and terrible. At the southern border, El Salvador is helping the United States in a big way. You should know that their southern border is a mess. When they look at El Salvador, they see that fewer and fewer people from El Salvador are going north. This means they really like President Bukele, because he's helping them with a big problem at the southern border. Now they want other countries to do the same thing, to pick up where Bukele left off. And this would cut down on the number of people coming across the southern border. Second, to answer your question, it is hard. There's the IMF to think about. You may know that John Perkins wrote about the International Monetary Fund, IMF, in his book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Perkins worked for banking and the IMF. When a country in Southern or Central America did something that Wall Street bankers didn't like, they would send in the economic hitman and throw the leader of that country, among other people, out of an airplane. And there are many cases of this in history. It's not a question. They do this, and they have done it before. These days, that job is done by the IMF. Its goal is for every country in the world to use the US dollar. Last week, Donald Trump said that he would punish countries that stopped using the dollar. That's why they're so scared. A lot of people are scared that the dollar will lose its status as a world reserve currency. They can't do anything about it. But, President Bukele has pretty much gone head-to-head with the IMF. He is also in the process of leaving the IMF. The economy is growing fast enough without help from the IMF. Thanks a lot. How much money the country has. The country of El Salvador has hundreds of millions of dollars on its books, which is close to $1 billion in Bitcoin. They are putting Bitcoin in their savings, which helps them grow even though the money is crazy right now. Not only do they use Bitcoin as legal money every day, but the country has also added it to their books. Our Adopting El Salvador Passport service is here to help. Donors are giving us $1 million so that we can get an El Salvadoran passport in 2 weeks. After that, the money goes into Bitcoin. There is another type of financial architecture going on that supports Bitcoin. The country will not only accept Bitcoin as payment, it will also become a fully guarded Bitcoin country. This could make it the richest country in the world, since all the other countries will lose their money in fiat currency madness. All of them are throwing this. You should know that El Salvador is going to be the next Singapore. In the next 5, 6, or 7 years, this country's GDP will triple. Jim, this is the place to be. The US is a terrible place to live. To be clear, you are welcome to waste your time in that horrible place. But there is only one country in the world where you can be a part of the change, where people are hopeful and building the future, and where you can freely speak your mind and do business. That country is El Salvador.